When Mike asked me to do this, I thought, geez, this is going to be difficult. That period, 1825, 1830s, was a real train wreck of all sorts of social things going on. You know, the political parties were dysfunctional, they were breaking apart, personalities were dominant. There was great concern about foreigners coming in with a strange religion that did not at all seem compatible with local Christian churches. There was questions of fairness, that maybe there was an elite that was controlling things. And also, now you had the opportunity to connect to an outside world, which presented different challenges. It was a new world in so many ways. In fact, there's a great quote, though it has come from the Delaware and Hudson Canal. It applies here too. I'll just read it to you. It's from a local history down near Ellenville. In 1844, we are told, I always like that qualifier, we are told, a young man married a farm girl and took her by canal from Middleport to Ellenville for their wedding night, a distance of 7 miles. When she got back home, she told us how beautiful the world was. She had no idea it was so large. So, you know, in some ways that affected here. Now, what caused that, obviously, was the Erie Canal. The canal, now I'm going to the, you know, if that was the hopeless side, now the hope side. It was their equivalent to us putting a person on the moon. And they thought that. They were extremely proud of it. It was more than a technological achievement. It almost confirmed the nation's status as the city on the hill. And that carried all sorts of other religious implications with that I'll go into a little bit further. It confirmed that they were the descendant, if you will, the receiver of the great Greek traditions of democracy and the like. They were very proud of this. It was just one more clue that they were on the right track. Indeed, people thought that the canal was just one part of what was to become the new millennium. And there was a concept at the time called perfectionism, which, you know, there's a whole avenue in terms of religion of how that means, but perfectionism in terms of society making things work, that government had a role. I'm often stumbled by the fact that people don't realize that the Erie Canal was built by government, okay? Not just, you know, the railroad company. They recognized that government had a role in society, and this was a great demonstration of it. Not this canal, though. This is the enlarged Erie Canal. And it's a great view, and I hope you all come to the park.
How did you get that shot?
Drone.
It was a really big ladder. Though when you go to the park and you go into Lock 52, yeah, I'm sorry, there was a drone. You can still see, though this lock dates from the 1850s, it does have a clue in the chamber that points to how important the canal was to Port Byron. Now let's see if this works. Okay. So when you go into the chamber, you'll see against the wall the stone from when they built the lock in 1853. This very top stone, you can see how that's different. That was added in the late 1890s as part of an improvement to deepen the canal from 7 feet to 9 feet. But what I want to point out is this line of stone. You can see how that's sort of different than the ones below. That was added on in 1853, and the reason it was added on in 1853 is as part of the enlargement, the state wanted to straighten the canal. There were, because of the original construction, a number of loops, curves, snake-like cuttings across the landscape. The reason being, back in the teens and 20s, that if you followed the hillside, you only had to build half a canal. But with all those loops, well, if you cut those loops off, you could get one more trip from New York to Buffalo in during the season, which is a big thing. What the problem was, Port Byron had developed on one of those loops. So the village fought the state. Mike, I think it went on almost 20 years.
Yeah.
I mean, because of the first surveys were in the 40s, and it wasn't resolved until
58, 57, 58.
And just a little secret, I shouldn't say this. When I looked at the state's holdings, they still own a little bit of that. You know, they've never abandoned part of that, but I don't want to get in trouble on that. Okay, but because they had finished this lock and it was desperately needed for the enlargement, but they were still debating with the village, they decided to hook up the lock to the Clinton's Ditch. This is the Clinton's Ditch, in this case kind of the 1819 canal, and you can see where it loops down into the village, right behind here, right, Mike?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay.
That little basin right by your hand.
Right, so
That's
we're right there.
Yep.
And then there are portions of the aqueduct that still survive. And then it loops up there to what was the predecessor lock to Lock 52, also called Doolittle's Lock. Erie Doolittle was the contractor who built it. It goes by other names as well. And a detail of the lock. Now, at this lock, this is to get into some of the personalities. You see this side cut here? Early on, some very perceptive entrepreneurs went to the state and said, geez, you know, you don't need all that water. And this is at the west, almost at the west end of the Jordan Summit. Could we use that water to power a mill? So for not very much money, because the state thought it was a great deal, they allowed Mr. King and Mr. Higley to build a mill there to use that water as it spilled over. And King and Higley, Seth Higley, will come into the story in just a bit.
And that long building is a cooperage.
Yeah.
That's where they were making the barrels.
So here's a receipt from 1821 to Enos Higley from Reuben Bangs. Reuben Bangs was the local canal superintendent, and it's a payment to Enos Higley. He's the son of Seth Higley. Enos was the lock tender at the lock in 1821. We'll get back to him in a minute. So, this receipt, by the way, is one of thousands and thousands and thousands of receipts, and thousands of receipts, from the construction of the canal in the first years of operation that are now at the New York State Archives. So,
Somebody was smart enough to save them.
or too lazy to throw them away. We are talking state workers. I'm sorry. I'm thankful nobody threw them away, and I was a state worker for over 30 years, so I don't know what that sounds like. Okay, so the Clinton's Ditch lock was only a single chamber as opposed to the double chamber of the enlarged Erie, and it looked probably something like this, with gates at either end. And I'll do details of this in a moment. So here's a map of the canal in the process of being enlarged. You can still make out the blue line is still being used of the Clinton's Ditch, and this sketched line is the route of the enlarged Erie. So this is about 1855. What they've done, because they're still debating whether to abandon Port Byron, so to speak, they have hooked up the enlarged Erie lock to the Clinton's Ditch alignment. You can see the arrow here to the two chambers, and here's the single chamber of the Clinton's Ditch. So they've hooked it up to the old route, pending the court decisions, which the village loses. So, and then in 1858-59, they take the enlarged route. Oh, and just a detail in the village. So we would be, Mike, right about here?
Yeah.
In fact, it might be one of those buildings, right? I've sent you that, right?
Yep.
How far did the canal move?
Hundreds of yards. Yeah, so here it is here, and here it is here.
But why is that an economic problem for the village if it moves 3 blocks?
Well, because you had all the warehouses and mills and things down here. So, Beach's Mill, right, Mike?
Yeah.
So he actually had a slip to load canal boats directly. Here it's a lowland, so,
You're basically taking the canal out of the village proper.
They had a problem with the parking lot at the Catholic church because that old, the ditch went right down behind the Catholic church.
right. I'm probably getting ahead of myself. It's always amazed me that the Roman Catholic Church, which I assume the founders of that were Irish, right? In fact, in the local history, that seems to imply that. The altar for the Catholic Church is basically right on the towpath. And the people who built that church, what, in the 60s, 1860s? Yeah, so very soon after the ditch was abandoned, I just had the sense of these Irish laborers going to their church, and they would have known that the altar is on their canal towpath. So I won't push that point any further. But okay, so by 1859, the canal is abandoned and the enlarged Erie is here. So that there are a number of communities that got cut off because of that. In some places, they did maintain the loop. Holly, New York, they maintained the loop. But it did make a savings in time.